Mike Neville is a retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. And Mike, in a moment, I want to ask you about the West Midlands Police Chief, but I've got to ask you about this as well, because you're a brilliant political commentator. What do you make of the interview I've just had with Robert Buckland, in particular suggesting that the outgoing Tory MP and now Reform UK supporter Robert Jenrick, borderline racist for his recent remarks about the West Midlands? What do you think?
Well, I was sat there shaking my head like many of the viewers and listeners. I mean, what gets me with people like Sir Robert, he talks about being a Christian and humility, and then he has the arrogance of telling us really that he knows best, that we shouldn't talk about things because experts like him, they'll sort it out. And I think he probably did the best political broadcast for the Reform Party you'll see in many a year, because anybody who was even thinking, I might stick with the Conservatives, having listened to that and put their head in their hands, they must be thinking, no way, because these people have learnt nothing. They've learnt nothing at all. They think they did all the right things with the ridiculous lockdowns. They think they did all the right things for immigration. All they do is come out with excuses and tell people like me and you that they're much cleverer than us and they know best. I thought that interview, if I was anything to do with the Conservative Party, I would tell him to keep his mouth shut and never go on the TV again.
What about this suggestion that Robert Jenrick's remarks about life in the Midlands being borderline racist? I'll give you the quote. This was October 2025, and Jenrick described the Birmingham district of Handsworth as one of the worst integrated places he'd visited, as close as I've come to a slum in this country, and he said that he'd not seen another white face during his visit there. Was that remark racist, Mike?
Not at all. It is simply the truth. And the accusation of racism is bandied around to keep our mouth shut. And it's been used for about 3 decades. And thanks to stations like Talk, that has been kicked into touch. We can now discuss these things, and we can tell these technocrat, expert lawyers that they don't know best, that we want our country to be integrated, to be a good place, and we cannot have these ghettos anymore, because they're a breeding ground not only for breaking up our society, but a breeding ground for terrorism.
Is invoking skin colour, though, not inherently divisive, inherently prejudicial, inherently racist, Mike?
You can't get away from what you see with your eyes, and people see that people are different. And that's one of the characteristics of being different. If everybody in a certain area wore yellow clothes and everybody else wore red, it would stand out. These just exacerbate the difference of the area. If you went into an area and everybody was speaking a different language, you wouldn't feel at home. So all these things just tell us that place is not part of this nation. They are literally cut off. If you go to my hometown, Bolton, and places like that, there are areas which have got mainly white, but some Hindu, maybe black, Jewish people, Chinese, all together. And then there's an area which is completely Muslim, and it is completely cut off. And that is not a good way for society to develop.
Mike, let's get you on to policing, if I can now, after those fascinating remarks in regard to the Jenrick defection. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has been commenting on the fact that the West Midlands Police Chief Craig Guildford is still in post. It seems like he's reluctant to go, even though he's been caught up in an anti-Semitism row. Here he is, Wes Streeting, Health Secretary, speaking to Times Radio.
Yeah, I'm absolutely shocked that he's still in post. I genuinely thought that having misled Parliament, that having misled the public, and having had one of his own local MPs, the Home Secretary, saying she had lost confidence in him, I honestly thought that anyone with integrity would at that point say, I have to resign. And the fact he hasn't, I really think is a stain on his character that if he doesn't act quickly, he won't be able to remove. So we don't expect people in public service or public life to be perfect or infallible. And we know that people will make mistakes. But you do have to take responsibility for those mistakes. And when you've failed so fundamentally that you've lost the confidence of the community you serve and the people that you report to, it really is time to go. So I hope he does the right thing. I will be horrified if he is still in post by the end of the day.
Are we focusing, Mike Neville, too much on the fate of Craig Guildford? Is this story not redolent of the wider culture of two-tier policing in this country?
I think it does reflect that, and the way that some communities have more power over the police than others. And we saw this where you have a Israeli team flying into the country. There is very little, if any, consultation with the Jewish community, but there's all manner of consultation with various Muslim groups and mosques with all sorts of very questionable imams who've made all sorts of questionable statements about beating wives and homosexuality being a sin and a crime. So this is a problem with the police. The police have engaged in what I call often lazy consultation. They listen to those who shout the loudest rather than listen to a balanced view of different groups to come to an opinion.
Fascinating, isn't it? Do you think that he will survive the day, Craig Guildford?
Well, it's been reported in the Mail just that they think he's going to go today. I mean, he's been clinging on legally because he knows that the only person in the law who can get rid of him is the Police and Crime Commissioner, Simon Foster, in the West Midlands, and he is a dedicated Corbynite. And again, I've just read the Times are saying that this Foster character offered a letter to the Green Lane Mosque saying, if you want to apply for any grants or government money, you can have a sort of free pass from me. So that's he's a Corbynite, Foster. So he's been clinging on to him. And I think the other thing with people like Craig Guildford is they live in a bubble. They'll talk about diversity, but everybody they meet, there's no diversity of thought. They believe all the same things. So they'll all be telling him that he was right in the end. Somebody needs to tell the emperor that his clothes are in fact not made of anything and he's naked and it's time to go.
Mike, great to see you. Have a good Friday. We'll catch up soon. Mike Neville is a retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector.